Hello. I can't explain this. You're just gonna have to look at it and embrace it. I'm gonna read Shy. And I'm gonna tell you nothing about it. No, I don't want to eat dinner with Jesse. Tell her. Be Crow for me. Let Crow out. I want to see him. Just let me spend some time with him. Shy looked across the table of the very fancy restaurant she brought me to. Please? Her tone was warm and desperate, her eyes hungry for a meal, but not any that would be served at this place. And not for me. I need to show you how we got here. I need to let you know how a perfectly sane woman and a strong, firm, loving relationship lost her mind and her heart to a character that did not even exist. As the degenerates began to ramp up and the addiction became deeper, bone deep, I looked around and I knew that I needed to escape this place. I needed to find a way into college and I needed out of Waynesville. This is long before Bravo and Ty would verbally assault me for my sedentary life. This is when we all lived at Hart's house and the party would not end. When no one wanted to go home and we all wanted one more. Basic was going to college in Denver and his parents didn't want him to go alone. He came for money and they said they would pay for the apartment, the travel, money, the food, and everything else if he wanted to take a friend. He proposed the idea to me and I jumped at it. I remember the last day I lived with Hart. Everyone showed up except Harvard. He was still failing out of SMSU and would not pack it up and come home for a few more months. But while I was there, Jamie and Hart Basic stood by the U-Haul smoking cigarettes and waiting for the crying to stop as they all said goodbye to me. There's a last picture, I think. They made Caddy take it. All of us leaning against the U-Haul. And this is moments before we climb into the Jeep Cherokee, Comanche, and pull off. Hart has her arm around my shoulders. Wally is crouched on the ground. Jamie huddled near, and Basic is smoking a cigarette with his shade glasses on, holding his hand at his thigh, flipping the bird. The drive was insane. I may have already told you about it. At this point in the book, I'm writing stories in all sections at once. I just wrote a chapter in the swashbuckler, the bards and scribes section, and we'll go back to the round table tonight to write about Dee. But for now, I'm here. I do not know if I will have the time to tell about the adventures out to Denver, but I hope I do. It's a story worth telling. We got out to the apartment and it was tiny, no bedrooms, small kitchen, a walk-through closet that led to a bathroom, and a medium-sized living room. We divided the living room in half with my bookshelves and made a bedroom for Basic. I laid the mattress in the closet and that led to the bathroom, and we figured it out. No job, but we needed money for random crap, so we got temp work. Odd thing, temp work. You never know what kind of day you're going to have. We went to a packaging plant, packing boxes of some sort, some such thing. Basic was working the shrink wrap machine by the end of the day. We worked at a nightmare shop. There were shelves and shelves of tiny boxes, each numbered with 3 number codes with few letters thrown in and a few more numbers. These were sheets of folders that pilots needed for flight plans into cities. They were very thin, tissue paper thin, in places with indescribable drawings on them and more numbers. The boxes that held them were small and filled with stacks of hundreds of these sheets. Now, it's very important that the wrong sheet did not end up in the wrong box. So the rule was, if you pulled 2 sheets on accident or purpose, you had to let them fall on the floor and ignore it. Soon we were walking into a carpet of slick paper with a list of letters and numbers on a file full of tissue paper flight plans. It was a nightmare for us because we were dyslexic and we walked through the littered papers. Artists made shapes with the dropped pages, often bringing up monsters made of paper like mache that took many forms. They all swatted arms at me and I kept walking, trying to ignore the swinging arms and kept staring at numbers and letters that swam in my head. Well, Basic and I both played D&D and we played a few games, but got bored pretty easily. He was not a great player. That's not fair, but it is a bit. See, it takes a different kind of player to play a game run by artists. Most gamers are prepared for a simple game of D&D, mostly numbers and maps with a bit of storytelling. Most dungeon masters run games from modules with packaged plots and characters. Artist games tend to be character-based with hot running emotions and a lot of role-playing. There was so many screaming matches and times when role players would break down in tears. I even threw a chair at a player last year in a particularly intense scene. I was never going to hit him, but I got the desired effect. What I needed was a better gaming group. And back then, if you were new in town, you had one option. We went to gaming shops, hobby shops, wherever you would find rule books and dice, and we checked the bulletin board. Players would leave cards with contact information, and DMs would put up cards with how many players they were looking for and a number to call. We found a card and we brought that number home. They were looking for a DM, and I called the guy and got an answering machine. Yeah, I'm looking for Gazer. Look, my name is Jesse Teller and I'm a DM. I got your number off a board in a hobby shop and I was wondering if you ever found that DM and if you wanted to get together and see if we were a good match. Get back to me when you can. Hope to hear from you. Well, it was a week before we heard back. Him and his roommate Shai had met a lot of shitty DMs through that card, and they had meant for a year to take it down. They were very careful about who they played with because they had bad luck, but he wouldn't like to come over to hang out and see if we matched up okay. I invited him and he showed up. We exchanged a few stories. Then when he realized I was not a mess, we made a character. We played a game that I was not satisfied with, but he seemed to get into. And he shook my hand at the door and promised he would be calling me back. 1 hour later, he did. Well, I told Shai about the game and she's pretty excited. She likes what you do. I like what you do. And we wanted to know when you could come over and we could run something. I heard someone yell something in the back and he laughed. She said she would cook. When we got there, I was told we were waiting for one more person. They said he was the very best player they knew, and he was interested in my gaming style. Said that he had an arrogant paladin, and they laughed and exchanged stories of his legendary character for about a half an hour. When he arrived at the apartment, I knew they were full of shit. He was tall, wore a tank top and basketball shorts, and he carried a basketball with him. As I gave him his character background, he spun the ball on his finger and seemed almost uninterested. Jocks aren't good role players. With a bit of idiocy, I was telling myself that at the time, and I lost all hope that he would be anything worth playing with. I tried to figure out how I was going to talk them out of having him at the next game, and I started my game. The jock was running a barbarian. At the moment it was his turn to talk, he set the ball down. He licked his teeth and closed his eyes. When he opened them, I was sitting in the room with the barbarian. I can't explain it. It's not the body language, though his arms were moving in a different way. It's not the way he talked. Gamers that spoke with an accent always bugged me. It was a thing he did with his face, maybe. I'll look at his eye. The jock had turned into a barbarian in front of me, and I embraced it. Shai played a warrior, and quickly she ran into a character that I called Crow. He was a bit borrowed from a movie, The Crow, in appearance and name. His weapons were short swords, and his Black Panther I grabbed from a famous fantasy character from the Forgotten Realms book. He was not original. He was a character slapped together in the blink of an eye. That will be a problem. Just watch and see. He wore all black with waist-length black hair and deeply tanned. He saved her from being surrounded, and they fought their way out. By the end of the game, the two characters kissed. Shai thanked me and Basic for coming, and we set up a game for the next weekend, and off we went. On the third gaming night, when I arrived at the door, Shai handed me a letter. She looked flushed and out of breath. Don't read it here. Read it when you get home. We played. Great game. I fell in love with the Jock's Barbarian and used it for inspiration for the mountain folk in my writing. And when I got home, I read the note. I don't remember it verbatim, but it went something like this. Crow, I can't stop thinking about you. I feel your eyes on me at all times. When I wash the dishes, when I'm at work, I can smell the musk of Lady, your Black Panther. And I know that you wait for a time when we can be together. My body, I want to give you. All my time, I want to spend with you. Tell me you love me, this time on paper. Then let me carry it in my work pants every day next week. Don't make me wait. Write me soon. With all my love and devastating desire. Shamala. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed the piece of paper and wrote it out. I did not want to get in the way of her and Gazer, and I assumed this would end somewhere in a bed with our bodies entwined. I wrote the letter, gave it to her next weekend, and the next day she was pounding on my door. I don't want this, she snapped. Why would I want this? She threw the letter back at me and looked at me exasperated and hurt, impatient and very confused. This is signed with the name Jesse. I'm with Gazer. I don't want you. She turned in a circle and clenched her fist. What do you want? I want Crow. She looked about to cry when she said it. Can you get Crow to write me a letter? Just tell him I want to carry it with me. Tell him that I said I cannot wait and I will be back here tomorrow before work. Tell him I said hello and tell him I love him. She kissed me and pulled back. Give him that for me. She turned and walked down the hallway. That was not for you. That was for Crow. This continued for weeks. I was in Denver for 2 months. I think maybe 3 before I got too lonely for the degenerates and I came home. The last night I was there while packing up, the last bit of it, Shai knocked on the door. Black dress, tight and short, low cut, and showed every bit of her voluptuous body, and her fishnet stockings were kind to her legs. I stared at her for a while, unable to take my eyes off her body and the way she dressed. I want to take Crow out to dinner before you leave Denver, she said. Does he like to dress? Can you ask him? I looked into her eyes, and you might be surprised to know this, but I did not see crazy. I can usually sense crazy. I couldn't this time. She was definitely crazed, But with the dress and the way she held her body, she did not look crazed. She looked focused. She was getting time with Crow. She just needed to get me out of the way. No, I don't want to eat dinner with Jesse Teller. Be Crow for me. Let Crow out. I want to see him. Just let me spend time with him. Shai looked across the table of a very fancy restaurant she brought me to. Please. Her tone was haunting. That's what I remember the most was her tone. She needed this. Knew this was the last time she would ever see Crow. So I went with it. I closed my eyes, lowered my head. I summoned up the character and looked up and opened my eyes. I sighed. Shemaiah, I was so scared I would not get to see you again before Jesse left. He's been so busy and had no time. She reached across the table with the red painted nails and gripped my hand. We are together now. This was not Shadow. This was not Servant, not Artist or Ronin. This was something new. This was a new altar that I have seen a few times. I saw him once when Becca was sleeping in our old apartment. He stood over the bed and stared at her, wondering if she was Shamala. His massive black panther laid the other side of the bed with its bottom jaw on the bed looking at her. I saw him once on the stairs to the basement. He sat with his swords on his lap, his panther curled on the floor at the bottom of the stairs, its long tail flicking back and forth, its thick whiskers twitching. Crow wrote a scene in the Manhunter book, Hemlock, though I do not know which one. Crow was created out of one woman's desperation. He haunts this house. He haunts this body. I'm not sure what he's looking for. I don't know how to tell him that he's not needed anymore. I'm not sure if he has ever met Becca of the boys. He loves Sadie, a Rottweiler, and he comes out at night to pet her and whisper to her. If he's in love with Shamala, he's not in love with Shai. See, just like I was just a conduit for Shai to get to Crow, Shai was just a path to Shamala. She drew a picture of Shamala in black ink and colored pencil. We still have it laminated to our DM screen. Every now and then, when I go to run a game, I will stare at it for a minute too long, and I will feel the breath of a black panther on the back of my neck. I'm not going to explain that one. I'm not going to tell you anything more about Crow, except to tell you this is his necklace. It's a crow with a crow. You can call it Odin's crows because that's what this necklace was meant to be. Mugen, memory and something else. I don't know. All I know is that this is Crow's necklace. You've seen me wear it before. I don't know. I don't know how to talk about it. That's the beginning of this episode. I'm going to leave it there. Stay with me because I'm talking about Normal Street tonight. Stay with me because I'm talking about the changing of the world and a book that will, my son said it best, Normal Street will shadow the world, he said. I don't know if that's true, but it's believed by him. So We'll see. I have a pocket square to talk about. I have the pictures from the last video to talk about, and I have to talk to you about Normal Street because I unleashed it upon the world. It's got claws and a maw, and it runs and it growls. It has in its scent, it has a certain kind of person, a certain deviant. I'm not going to talk about any of that tonight, but I will give you the image of Normal Street, the essence of Normal Street. I hope you stick around for it. I'll be right back. Blue and black. My pocket square tonight is blue and black. Might be hard to see. I let my wife pick it out. And I simply don't question her choices. Okay, so in the last video, you saw a series of pictures. Just pictures of a street. They were taken during the summer. In a lot of them, you can see the shadow of my wife. And that's Normal Street. Normal Street is an actual place, just like Teardrop Road. Normal Street is the place where the darkest days of my life were spent. Where I needed Catherine. And you've heard about her before. Normal Street is the very essence of my greatest. It's the the setting of my greatest victory and my undeniable loss. So if you want to understand Normal Street, I would tell you to buy the book, read what I've written, and try to make some sense of it. I don't think that's very hard. I think Normal Street has a definite message to send, and that you will find it. It's a war against evil. It's the rise of love. I'm gonna read you 3 chapters from Normal Street tonight that will show you the true scope of the book. We're going to start with Eve. This is the very first chapter of Normal Street. It's in a book called Hollow Man. It's called Eve. Bramble was my Uncle Rath's best friend. He was a good-looking guy with a mustache and curly brown hair. He was short and wore a lot of leather. He rode a motorcycle and he was a martial artist. Bramble loved me. He loved me more than any person alive, save one. Bramble loved my mother. Rose was a vision back then. Red hair, black eyes. She had a smile that could stop a bullet, and she was what the guys loved to call sassy. Rose loved Bramble from the beginning. Way back when she was in kindergarten, she had loved him. They were the perfect together in almost every way. He respected her and let her talk, and he listened. He was protective of her and made her feel both soft and hard. In my opinion, Bramble was my mother's soulmate, and that relationship was about to explode into bits. But first, this night, and the first time I realized I was in love. Uncle Rath had a crew. They were not a gang, but they rolled like one. They were about 6, maybe 7 guys, and they were born to be friends. I cannot separate my uncle from these men. To know one is to know them all. I can't remember much about them, but I will give you what I can. Giant was huge, a Native American, and well over 6'7". His skin was dark and rich. His laugh, enormous and immense. He was so big, I used to climb him for fun. He would curl his arms, and I would pull myself up. I would kick my feet over to his other arm and pull until I was at his shoulder. I would grab his head and wrap my arms around him, would step up, bracing myself against his massive belt buckle, and pull. I would twist around until I was around the back of his neck, then wrap my legs around his neck and sit on his shoulders. There, I would stay until it's time for me to go to bed or hit the bathroom. Giant was kind, but he was the sort of man who could break anything he wanted to with just a bit of force and a surge of anger. There was Sly. Sly was probably Rath's other best friend if we're throwing around labels. He had a kind face and a wild laugh. He knew exactly what to say and when, and he knew how to take over a room. He had a great love and they could not work it out. And every time I saw him from the time when I was 5 until years ago, that woman's name came up. Don't find a girl like makeup, Sly would say. She's the worst thing that ever happened to me. That girl will be the death of me. A few months later. I don't need to go out tonight, guys. Makeup and I are going to her parents tomorrow, and I have to get up ass early in the morning. He would shake his head, make for the door, but another vodka and soda would be put in his hand, and he would laugh. Within a few minutes, Sly was in his seat again. And then next time, I'm done with that woman. Shoot me in the fucking head if I ever say her name again. All of the guys from my uncle's crew, I wish I was in touch with Sly the most. But when things go bad with Raph, they go really bad. And I will never be in that man's life again. There was Billabong. I don't remember much about him. I know he was good to me. I know one day he pulled me aside and said if anyone ever hurt me, he would slice them to bits. I remember he died a violent death when he was too young. There were a few others. Another Native American carried a Bowie knife on him everywhere he went. When I picture this guy, I see a red bandana on his head. There was another, I can't remember. I do not remember his name. I do not remember much about him to this day. But if I had his phone number right here, sitting in front of me, and I was in trouble, I could pick it up and tell him I was Uncle Rath's nephew, and the man would be here. I would have to meet him at the door and ask him his name, but he would be here. This crew was shown to me way before I had friends as a definition of friendship. This sort of relationship is what I would grow to crave every day of my life until I met Berg and Bell. Until then, these men were the pristine example of what a friend could be. We'll get back to that. The event had to have been a wedding. It might have been an anniversary, but our people were poor, and this was put on by somebody that had cash laying around. My memory of the wheres and whys are so fuzzy that I can say with all honesty, there's no possible way I can label this event. I don't know what celebration we were at, but it was in full swing. All I know is there was music, dancing, and I was wearing a powder blue suit. Okay, back then I cut quite a figure in my powder blue suit. I had it down, the walk, the strut. I had the slight smile mixed with a bit of mischief. I had it all. Of course, I don't remember. I don't remember thinking about any of this. I don't remember thinking that I needed to walk a certain way or act a certain way, but without trying, I was smooth. Rath's friends thought I was. They laughed every time I spoke at the table we sat around with our suits and ties. They laughed and they told me different things to say. They would come up with something terribly inappropriate for a 5-year-old to say, point me, hold on, Adobe Flash Player is trying to, I don't need an Adobe Flash Player. They would come up with something totally inappropriate for a 5-year-old to say, point me at a woman at the event, and off I would go. I would tap a shoulder or take a hand. I would look them in the eye. Rath was sure to explain that nothing you said to a woman mattered. Worth a shit. And she said it while looking her in the eye. Look him in the eye and you own him, he would say. So look them in the eye I would. I would say the filthy thing I had been told to say. The table I would send to would shudder and curse. The woman would pull back, shocked but smiling, and Uncle Rath's table would burst into laughter. I would swagger back to the table, and they would pull me over and whisper to me again. This time, when you tell her, I want you to take her hand in yours and kiss her on the back of the hand. Look her in your eye. Remember that part, and then wink. Can you wink, Jesse? I winked at Giant. Good. Wink at her and say, nice ass. No, 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 sir. Rose snapped. Come here, darling. She reached out for me and I went to her. She hugged me to her chest and smoothed my hair. You are not having my little baby boy say that to a grown woman. You want to talk about a woman's ass, Giant? You do it yourself. She let me go and I stepped back. I look at the table, then to Rath. The man has a smile. Of all the men in the world I have ever seen, my favorite is Uncle Rath. His smile is half criminal, half child, half jester, and half lord. Okay, too many halves, but you get the picture. He smiled and nodded towards the woman. I looked at Bramble, who winked at me. I looked at Giant, who turned to see if my mom was watching before nodding and pointing to the window, to the woman, and I was off. I took the woman's hand. The entire table went silent. I heard my mother in the background yell out, damn it! And I looked the woman right in the eye. You have a nice ass, I said. Then I kissed her hand, turned in my powder blue suit, and walked away. Both tables erupted, and my mother was cursing. This was when Rose could curse better than a drill sergeant. When she had the mouth that was part harlot and part dock worker. She had a lot to say, and I ran to Uncle Rath, and he propped me up on his lap. Bramble handed me my cocktail. Then I drank out of the tiny straw. Okay. Now, before you lose your mind, I will give you the recipe to settle you. You get 6 ounces of ginger ale, 3 ounces of orange juice, 1 ounce of grenadine in a glass full of ice, and garnish with 2 cherries. Don't even bother ordering the drink if they don't have the tiny little plastic swords to pierce the cherries with. What you have now is called a Shirley Temple. And when I went out drinking with my Uncle Rath, which was oddly often, that was my drink of choice. I took a sip and Bramble went to dance with Rose. When years later, my mom was building the perfect romantic, she told me that I had to dance, that I needed to be able to dance to both slow music and fast. She would get a faraway look in her eye. And I know then what I know now while I sit here and write this story. She was thinking of Bramble. I stood on the edge of the dance floor, and the woman with the ass bent over, whispering in my ear. "Who told you to say that?" she asked. I turned and pointed at Giant. "Oh, really?" She patted my head and walked to Uncle Rath's table. She had business with Giant. When the song ended, the dance floor cleared, and the next song began. A few stragglers scooted to the side of the floor, but it was largely empty. Now, give me a minute. I want to get this next part right. The floor was slick. I had been out before with my mother dancing in my patent leather shoes. The lights were doing what lights could not do. They were swirling and rotating. They were swinging back and forth and emitting beams as if in search of something. I stood on the edge of the dance floor, staring out at the sea of gleaming lights. And she stepped out of the crowd and into the middle of the world. She might have been 4. No way she was 6. Her hair was down and flowing, but getting tangled as the night wore on. She wore a white dress that was mostly mesh and satin. She had on patent leather shoes too, but hers had a strap that stretched across the top of her foot. She stood in the middle of the floor, swaying by herself. I never got her name. I will call her Eve. I stared at her for a long time, breathless. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew what man and wife was. I knew what a girlfriend was. I knew deep in my core there was something missing. Some part of me that had not been finished when I was made, a hole. Hold on. A hole ran right through me. I knew. And in that moment, standing on the edge of that dance floor, staring at Eve, I knew what it was. I knew I would not be complete until I found it. I would walk around with a hole in me until I found a love. I turned as all the swagger ran out of my body and pooled at my feet, and I went back to the table. The woman with the ass was sitting on Giant's lap now. My mother was looking at me. Bramble was looking at me. I looked at them and knew they were complete. I looked at the other guys, and Wrath pointed at the dance floor. "Go," he said. "Now, go out there and dance with her. You dance with her right now." "He doesn't have to," Rose began. "No," Bramble said. "He ought to go. Go on, Jesse. I want you to go out there and dance with her. Take her hands very gently. And if she pulls away, you come right back over here. If she takes her hand away, if she gives you a mean look, you don't take it personal. You just walk away. Say sorry if you want to. But if she lets you take her hand, then you dance with her." "Give her a kiss," Wrath said. "No," Rose said. "Wrath, you're terrible. No, honey, don't kiss her. Just take her hand and be a gentleman." Suddenly I was there. On the dance floor with the first of them. I was staring at her and her me. The music cut off instantly in the middle of the song, and a new one popped back on. I know it was a slow song. I'm thinking the Bee Gees. I reached my hand out to hers, but I didn't take hers. She took mine. I had no idea what to do for a long time. So I just stood there, looking at each other, holding hands. I looked around. No one was on the dance floor, and every eye was on me and Eve. We began to sway. I took her other hand, and we swayed back and forth. I could not take my eyes off her face. I kept wondering if she was as beautiful as I thought she was. Or was I just thinking that because she was the only girl in the world? We danced that entire dance. and they stared at us the entire time. I looked up to see grown women crying. I saw couples hugging tight to each other. I saw my mother kissing Bramble. Then the song ended, and the entire place went quiet. I took her hand and placed a very tender kiss on the back of it. The entire room broke into applause, and that is all I can recall of Eve. She was the first, the girl who taught me that I was empty. From that day, I could hear myself echo as I walked. From that day, I felt a gnawing need for love. From that day, I needed Becca. I would have to wait for 16 years. Okay. Everybody has a first. Mine came to me when I was 5 years old. That's young. More young than most of you, I think. But women had a way of finding me. I think it's this. My family was so unhealthy that I couldn't understand love. And it wasn't being taught to me. So I had one girl after the next. If you've read Teardrop, then you know about Ruffle and Jazz. You know about Draconic and Mary. A little bit about Precious. You know about Destiny. If you've read Teardrop, you know that there are sprinkles of girls all throughout my life. I needed every one of them because I needed to be taught about love. I needed time and time again to learn lesson after lesson of romance before I was ready for Becca. In the story Hollow Man of Normal Street, you will find out about all of the girls that taught me to be with Becca. You will find out about me and Becca's entire beginning of our relationship. It's heartbreaking. It's terrible at times, but there it is. A man being taught how to be with a woman after time after time of disaster after disaster. A man being taught to be with a woman. I'm gonna leave it at Eve. That's Hollow Man. That's the beginning of Hollow Man. Hollow Man runs through. I've told you what it says. And Hollow Man is a huge part of Normal Street. Because if you don't understand Hollow Man, if you haven't taken the time to read it, you'll never understand the rest of the story and why it's so important. Okay, now The next reading I make is going to be from the next section of Normal Street. We're talking about Normal Street today because I released Normal Street um, about a week ago. So far, it's doing pretty good. It's gonna change everything. It's gonna make a mark on the world, or it's gonna fail. My oldest son read it. He said, this book is either going to do nothing or it's going to shatter the world. So we'll see. We'll see what Normal Street does. But this is the beginning. The first chapter of Normal Street, Eve, my beginning of the search of love. So there you have it. And yeah, when I come back as a lunatic. I come back with madness to tell. I come back after me and Becca broke up the first time. The second time. When me and Becca broke up the second time. And I come back and I will tell you about a time when I was trying to put myself back together and a time when I failed. I only have pieces. There's a 3-day stretch of time shortly after I moved into South Towers where I broke loose of reality. And for that moment of time, I became a kind of amalgamation of artist and Teth. I became something both riotously creative and utterly savage at the same time. I will do what I can to bring that set of shifting, unstable moments together in a way that'll make sense to you, make sense for us. For in that span of time, I do not really know what happened to me beyond me rattling around my apartment. And everything in my mind broke free. And I became abstract. Siren was going on a trip with her parents. She would be gone for 3 days. Becca was going on a trip to see her parents. She would be gone for a week. I was, for the first time, left alone for any extended amount of time. And I was fine for the first day. I remember taking a walk that first day after I woke up. It was freezing, it was freeing being without supervision, without anyone to coddle me or make their life about me. I felt like I was a burden to no one. And I walked down Springfield with a kind of wide-eyed wonder. I felt sane for the first time in so long. Like I could do anything. And I realized that having people around me constantly had made me feel sick. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just a troubled man who needed a little time to himself. With this idea in mind, I went upstairs. I stripped to my boxers. With company in my house around the clock, I was unable to be naked or nearly naked, very seldom. And it felt good to be free, to free myself of clothing and just sit on the couch and look around the room. I tried to watch a show, tried to watch a movie, but the noise of it and the flickering motion of the images passing by were distracting and overwhelming. Soon I put on a song by Linkin Park and turned it real low, just loud enough to hear, just loud enough to hum right in the background. A slight pulse, a kind of a bass coat of vitality and verve. The song I chose was Breaking the Habit. It's about a person who lives a life of drama, who's been blaming everyone else for his problems and decides to take a bit of responsibility to put himself back together. The song had allowed a breakthrough a few weeks prior and was becoming an obsession with me. I put it on repeat. Then I lit a candle. I shut the curtains, pulled out the candle, and set it in the middle of the coffee table and sat, looked at it, and watched it burn. I got caught. That's the best way to say it. I got caught. I could not take my eyes off it, could not pull them away. And I watched a fat current candle burn 6 inches without taking my eye from it or stopping to do anything else. This is when I broke loose, or broke free of all reality. I soon dropped to the floor and pulled out a journal D had bought me. It was blue and leather with a decorative quill embossed on it and an inkwell. The inside had an inscription he had written. It was encouraging and loving, and I opened the book and wrote the creation myth of my fantasy world I would become engaged with later in life. This is where it first came to being. This is where my world began to spark. When I was done writing that book, that myth, I put the book away and have never written in it again. I found my old comp box and I pulled one out that I had used to take some notes in college class. There were about 5 pages filled in it. But other than that, it was blank. And I began to write. I wrote death. I'm not sure why, but I wrote a death for every one of my friends and what scant family I had left. I wrote them all dying. Then I created a girl. She was known to me as the first girl. She went to everyone who had died in the book, and she brought them all back to life. I pulled a knife from under the coffee table and sliced my boxers off. See, I had forgotten how to take them off. I crawled to the bathroom and peed in the shower. I was thirsty, so I drank half a 2 liter of Dr. Pepper. I set it in the middle of the room, sat cross-legged in front of it, and told it about love and about death. When I had told this half-empty bottle of soda about life and death, I drank it and threw it behind me. It rattled off the wall. Then I heard a noise. It rose above the din of Linkin Park song, a rattling and a scream. It lifted into the air like a howl of a banshee, and when it stopped, I heard talking. I heard the voice of a person as if they were far away, and I clapped my hands over my ears when the voice said it loved me. On hands and knees, I crawled to the next comp book and started to write the names of the people who loved me. I started to write the names of the people who hated me. I made lists of names of people I knew. Then I made lists of names of the people I did not know. When I was done, I was hungry. I found a box of Pop-Tarts, gripped it with one hand, and pounded it on a table with no knowledge of how to open it. I finally grabbed a knife and sliced my way in. I found paper and shattered bits of pastry. I ate it the best that I could. Then I took the broken bits and spelled out the words, I love you. I stared at them and wept for an undetermined amount of time before stomping on the bits of words until they were dust. Then I went and shit in the shower. I heard pounding. I ran to it, crouched low at the door. I pressed my body against the wood and my ear against the surface. I could smell a woman. She smelled as if she was in a hurry. Please don't ask how I knew that. Please don't ask me any questions at all. You would, if you were to start asking for an explanation, be asking me to make sense of insanity. All I could do is relate to you what happened. All I can do is tell you what I became. I fell asleep by the door, naked, my ass crusted with unwiped feces, my feet covered in stumps of bits of Pop-Tarts. I slept. I can't tell you how long before I woke, thirsty again. I carried the next 2-liter bottle of Dr. Pepper to the middle of the floor and drank. I don't remember how much I drank, just that when I was done, I prayed to that bottle to let me find a way out of the apartment, let me find a way back to life, back to sanity. It was becoming clear there was a world out there, that beyond this, all of this was a place where people talked and loved. I went back to my comp book after praying to a nearly empty bottle of Dr. Pepper, and then I grabbed the pen. I grabbed the new comp book and wrote words, then sounds. The sounds are those of the English language, the sounds the letters make when they are spoken free of words, the sound words are comprised of. I wrote as many as I could. That was when I started to write more. I started to invent sounds that other languages would make, sounds animals would make that did not exist. I wrote about animals that were dead for millions of years, and I wrote their sounds. Suddenly I could hear a conversation outside the door, and on hands and feet, I crawled to the door. I smelled a woman and a man. They were outside my door talking. The door kept braying as they pounded on it. And he began to say things of deep emotion. They loved me. They were trying to reach me, and I loved them. That love was pure for a few seconds. Then it turned perverse. Soon that love turned to lust. As the people tried to talk through me through the door, I masturbated to the love they spoke they had, in my mind, become lust. They were trying to reach me, but I was so far from the world, so far from anything sane, that it was impossible to find a way home. They left on hands and feet. I went back to the bathroom to relieve myself again. When I was done, I began to build a shrine. It started as me getting supplies. I grabbed a few kinds of food that I might need to survive the rest of this spell. I brought cans of beans and cans of juice. I brought a loaf of bread and some dry noodles. I brought a few different kinds of meat and a few more bottles of Dr. Pepper. I began to stack them all, and within an hour, I had my shrine. See, it was a shrine to survival, a shrine comprised of everything I would need to survive. I bowed to it and stood. I walked around it and I wept. I dropped on my knees before it and I begged for its help. When it did not help me, I went back to the bathroom and drank water from the toilet, washed my hands, and came back out. I was back at the comp books and I drew lines that might one day warp and twist to become letters, the shreds of words that, if they were put together, might one day be the story of my life. Surely that story would end here. I realized this was the story of my death. When they found me, they would need to know how I had fallen into this. They would need to know this was always going to be the end for me. A mind like mine could never make sense of the loss of innocence, the loss of love, the loss of family. This mind had been bashed to bits, and when left to itself for the first time in years, it had uncoupled and rolled downhill. I then drew warped lines on the page, lines they could use to bend and stiffen into letters. All of these lines would make letters that would explain what had happened to me. These random bits of lines would tell the story of what had finally broken me. This was the story of the death of my mind. I prayed to my shrine. I drank from my toilet. I shit in my shower. And I ate what little bits of food I still had in my pantry. The food in the shrine was too precious to eat, so I left that alone. I went to my comp book and I wrote, this time real words, this time a story. Not a story that made sense at the time, not a story that would make sense for a long time. This was a glimpse into the future, a dream of a life that one day might become. A story about the life I live now. I got a few things right. I did marry Becca. I lived with beasts of man and wolf. I sang it and watched miraculous visions of heroics and debauchery. I drank from fountains of whiskey and ate at the bend of the river of love. I went to the curtain and I leaned against it. When I passed out, I slumped left, and the curtain pulled back enough to expose the sky. When I woke, sunlight had struck on my shrine. With the sun came a return to sanity. It took me the rest of the day to clean up the mess I'd made. I showered, climbed into bed. I swept. I slept. A few days later, I took comp books and stacked them together. I took 4 rubber bands, then bound them together. Then I dropped them in a trash chute just outside my door. Most of this I've forgotten until tonight. This chapter of my life scares me. This is when I decide I should never be left alone. This is when I make the decision to keep Siren close. But a big part of me wanted to send her away and just rely on Becca, embrace the one I loved and build a life with her. But if anything called her away, this right here was what I would be looking at. I needed as much supervision as I could get. I would keep Siren around for a long time yet. I was just too fragile, and I could not trust myself to hold it together. But I had a bit of hope. A ray of light had shone on me. When I had lost my mind, I had built a shrine to survival. And I had prayed. I don't have much to say about that. I don't have much to say about that chapter of my life, that chapter in Normal Street. Um, it's the very image of insanity. It's what you find in Normal Street. The breaking of a mind. I don't know how I survived. I don't know how I made anything of myself in those days. How I took all the shattered bits and put them together. I know Becca had a lot to do with that. My my therapist Rick had a lot to do with that. I call him Stephen in the book. Sunshine had a lot to do with that. She was my social worker. I would find out that my social workers were making sure that I ate, making sure that I took my medicine, making sure that I paid my bills, that I showered, brushed my teeth, cleaned my clothes, got sleep. And that was all Sunshine. She made sure that I was living my life. Because back then I was helpless. A baby, an infant, doesn't know, can't clean itself, feed itself. It can't get a drink for itself. It has no control over when it sleeps. It just kind of exists. I guess that was part of it. I was helpless. The therapy, the darkness, the abuse, the DID, it was all too much. As I was slowly making sense of it all and remembering it all and putting it all together and mixing it all and making something that I could eat, that I could devour and turn the life into, the everyday just became impossible. How do you give a shit about having clean underwear when memories from your past are haunting you with every waking moment? How do you care if you eat when the nightmares are so powerful and so complete that you can't close your eyes and sleep? I couldn't even sit on the couch and close my eyes, and in between blinks I saw nightmares. And then I was left alone. The man that sits here, that tells you this story, that read that to you, is a miracle of proportions that are almost impossible to imagine. But here I am, a product of the love of Becca, the love of Sunshine, the hard work of Stephen, and the obsession of Siren. You add all those parts together and you have me. No, no, you don't have me. You have the base, the foundation that I was allowed to build myself on. I think that's the best way to say it. You add all those parts together and you have a foundation for me to stand on and slowly put brick by brick together to create the structure that is me and my life. Yeah, that's how I want to say it. Becca and her love, her undying, unconditional love. Sunshine and the job she had to do and the care that she put into it. Stephen and the work that he put in, sorting it all out and stacking it all up and writing it all down and guiding me through all the monstrous things. And then you have Siren. There's so many dark things I could tell you about Siren. So many things that she did. So many ways that she was a monster. She made me feel insane. She forced herself into my life. She used to talk to one altar, then talk to another altar, and talk to a third altar and get them all fighting, get them all struggling against each other. She knew how to say this guy had done this thing and this guy had done this thing, and she would inspire them to do those things until they were fighting against each other. Yeah, that's what I want to say about Madness, the chapter Madness. I'm taking out of context. You're going to learn more about it when you read Normal Street. Until then, that's what I have to give you. Now, I'm going to show you another section of Normal Street. I'm going to show you where things went, where things ended up. I hope you stick around for that. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna read this and then we're done. This is towards the end of Normal Street. It's by no means the climax of Normal Street. It goes on past this. But I'm just going to read this, and that'll be the end of the episode. Please, 2004. My birthday was one day off of grass. Every time I had a party or celebrated at all, I thought of him all day. So to break this problem wide open, I decided to celebrate my half birthday. My birthday would come and go unmentioned, but when the half birthday came, we would all go out. The celebration would be huge. So it was September 2004. Becca and I had been going strong since February, and I have the ring. Let's stop for a moment and really think about this ring. First of all, no store-bought ring would be good enough for her. Our relationship and our past demanded something different. No one had ever fought this hard for any love story that we had ever heard of. I figured out what I wanted, and I weren't searching for a craftsman. Me and Belle went to about 4 spots and talked to about 4 different people, looking for examples of their work, and I made my decision. I told them I wanted white gold. I wanted 2 angel wings, each wrapped around the diamond in the middle. Each would have the tips of its wings overlapping the other. When the 2 of them were set together on the finger, they would form one perfect piece. This guy had all sorts of questions about the wings. Evidently, I hadn't described it right. Dove wings, eagle wings, angel wings, raven wings. He wanted to know if this was a Harley Davidson kind of thing or what it was. My answer was angels. Months before I had started to date her the first time, I had the vision of the Archangel Gabriel. One of the wings was his. Shortly after she started yoga, she had a vision of the Archangel Michael. One of the wings was his. These 2 figures granted us strength and resolve when we were working on ourselves and when we were trying to get ready for our relationship together. We took the diamonds from the first ring I had gotten her and had them use that. They were small. They were not what I wanted. However, I saw it as a positive. This ring would be a thing that we added to in years to come, upsizing the ring as we went to make it more suitable to our growing lifestyle. The diamonds would be humble in the beginning, but the ring would not be. I poured money into its creation, and when it was done, I had the perfect ring for my soulmate. On my half birthday, I called Job. Need a favor, man? What can I do? I'm proposing to Becca today. I need a few rides around town. He grumbled, but called on Chanel, and together they came out and picked me up. We went to Walmart. I bought 2 candles. I bought a candle holder and matches. We went to the florist. I bought her a dozen roses. I went to Godiva and bought her some chocolates. They dropped me off 10 minutes before Becca was getting off work. She would immediately come to my house and pick me up for birthday dinner. I had 10 minutes to get ready. I was ready in two, and then I sat in a dark apartment, lit only by candles, and I rearranged the counter for 8 minutes while my heart pounded in my chest and I fought to control my breathing. Flowers to the left of the candle. She would look up to the candle and see the flowers, pick them up and turn to me, and I would be on my knees. No, flowers on the right. She would see the chocolates, then the candles, then the flowers. Then at the end of the counter, I'd be on my knees. No, candles in the back, chocolates and flowers up front. I can tell you, I tried every possible combination of these things and shuffled all over the counter before I heard her knock on the door. I walked to the door and pulled open the peephole. I stared out at her for a long time, seeing her beautiful face and her smile. I pressed my forehead against the door, my palm resting on the flat of the door, and I drew in a deep breath. I had no doubts. I knew without question I was doing the right thing. I unlocked the door, then opened it. I reached out, took her hand, and pulled her in. I closed the door behind her and pressed her against the wall. I kissed her. I remember that kiss, as if it were the one I gave her before I put her to bed tonight. It was long. It was slow. It was passionate. It was patient. It was a patient kiss. A kiss that has no plans but to be there in that moment. When I pulled back, I pressed my forehead against hers and I whispered, "Hello." "Hi," she said. "Happy birthday." "Yeah, thanks. I have something to you," I said. I still had not let her see the counter. She knew the room was dim. She knew we were in the dark. I took her hands and led her across my kitchen to the counter. Then I stepped aside. She looked down and giggled. "What's this?" she said. "It's your birthday. Why are you buying me gifts?" In the glow of the candlelight, her face was golden, her hair fire, her eyes gleaming. She stared down at my offering, and I grabbed the ring box off the desk behind me. I took her hands, and I dropped to both knees. It was always going to be both knees. When the first proposal was planned, it was both knees on the bridge, hiding the ring that I had bought for her, and begging her. When it was a second proposal, it was in front of the elephant tree. It was going to be both knees. I was never going to have pride enough when asking for her to be my wife to kneel on one knee. I felt the floor below me, hard linoleum on cement. I took both of her hands and I looked up at her. She stared down, smiling. I had words. I had prepared them. I had planned and summoned them up, but they were gone. They didn't exist anymore. No words made sense. I could see myself on my knees, struggling to breathe and fighting to make sense of words. So I called on Smear, Lord of Ire. I summoned him up and I felt him behind me, the black figure, the wings striped like the tiger and furry. But he was not hovering as he always was. He was not massive and beyond reckoning. He was the stature of a man, a simple man, not an immortal, not a god. But he stood no taller than 6 feet. His wings did not buffet behind him, but drooped slightly, casting a shadow on me. He had his head lowered, and I waited for his beautiful words. But in the face of the moment, he was humbled. He could not speak. He could only stare. I called on Guardian. From his knees, he ripped free his sword and drove the tip into the floor. He laid his forehead on the pommel and he closed his eyes. He did not speak, but prayed. Beside him, servant, on his knees, sitting on his feet, he bowed his head as if waiting for a command. He seemed to be praying, seemed to be wrapped up in his mind. Since the Battle of Normal Street, he had given up on Rose. He had devoted himself to the girls first, and his cousins, then to Siren. But when the worst of her became clear, he had gone on a journey of discovery. He'd sought the thing he could serve that would never let him down, never shame him or use him. And he found us. Servant had found that we, everyone in the mind, needed a servant devoted to our needs. Since that time, he has been pious and generous. He's been working on seeing to us, and he had begun trying to find out what he believed in. Now he is on his knees before the one thing he knows he believes in. He's kneeling before Becca. He's kneeling in front of the love they share, and he's praying to it. He has no words to say to her. He simply waits for instruction. Shade stands behind us, a hand on my shoulder, staring into her eyes, gripped by her beauty. Adam has poked his head around Smear's wing and is watching with wide eyes. All of them have come except Shadow, who sits on the couch smoking a cigarette and clapping. He does not want to get married, but he knows he wants Becca for the rest of his life. No one else will do. He's done looking, but marriage doesn't suit him. It'll take him 6 years before he's worked through all of his issues and is ready to commit to Becca in marriage. They will have a simple ceremony one night after Rafe goes to bed. They'll speak words, they will dance, they will both cry. But for now, Shadow watches from the living room as we struggle for any words to say the things we're feeling. Finally, as one, we look up at her and in unison, but only I can hear, we say, please. Our throat closes up, our mind shuts down. This is our entire life. This is the only thing that matters now. She giggled, just like a girl, and she smiled. Okay, she had said. She had words she had decided on. She knew this day was coming. But when faced with saying them, all she could do was agree. Please. Okay. So that's the episode for tonight. It's a glimpse into Normal Street. There's so much you haven't heard. So much for you to get a hold of. Normal Street is a tale of love, of pain, of loss. It's the story of a fight, a war. They could never be won, but it was fought anyway. And again, it's the story of love of the rest of my life. I hope you'll look for Normal Street. I hope you're willing to give it a chance. You're going to learn something from it. Good night. And we'll let Benny's baseline see you to the door. Thanks for coming. I'll see you next week.